It was a few summers back when I was still living with my parents in the same house I grew up in. I was 17. That weekend was different though. Out of nowhere, my parents decided to leave for a couple of days. Just the two of them. That never happened. They were the type who almost never left the house, always keeping everything neat and under control. So the second they pulled out of the driveway, I knew I had a rare chance on my hands.
Of course, I called MJ, my girlfriend back then, to come stay with me. It felt like one of those once-in-a-lifetime weekends where I finally had the whole house to myself. MJ was the kind of girl who always pushed the limits. Playful, a little reckless, the type who made even normal nights feel risky. Honestly, that side of her was exciting, but it also explains why things didn't last between us. Anyway, the moment she saw the pool glowing in the backyard, her face lit up. She leaned in with that mischievous grin and said, "We should skinny dip." I laughed it off at first, told her the neighbors would definitely see, but MJ wouldn't let it go. She kept teasing me, reminding me that nights like this wouldn't come again. Eventually, I gave in. She had that effect on me. Her energy was contagious. So we slipped into the pool, and before long we were laughing and splashing under the summer night sky. For a while, it felt almost too perfect. The warm water, the cool night air, and the two of us floating in our own little world. From the pool, we had a clear view straight into the house through the huge bay windows. Because the inside lights were on and it was dark outside, it looked like we were staring into a glowing dollhouse. It was strangely comforting, like even though we were outside, we were still connected to the safety of home. But that comfort didn't last. MJ was saying something, I don't even remember what, because the second my eyes drifted toward the living room windows, my whole body went cold. There it was, a shadow on the far wall. Not just some trick of the light, but a moving shadow, like the outline of a person walking slowly deeper into the house. I froze. My chest tightened and my heart started pounding so hard it felt like it might echo through the glass. Every instinct in me screamed that someone was inside. I didn't want MJ to notice the fear on my face, but she caught the way my smile dropped. Leaning close, I whispered that we needed to get out of the pool. She didn't argue. She just moved with me, quick but quiet, both of us trying not to splash too loud. Once we slipped onto the patio, I told her in the lowest voice I could manage to go to the pool house, shut off the light, and stay absolutely silent until I came back. Her playful energy was gone. She was pale, stiff, and clearly terrified. But she nodded and disappeared into the dark pool house without a word. I stood there for a second, staring at the glowing windows of my home, the same windows that had always made me feel safe. And suddenly they felt like eyes staring back at me. My hands were shaking as I opened the back door as slowly as I could, stepping into the kitchen where the air felt heavier, colder, like I was no longer in my house, but inside something else's territory. I kept telling myself this was my house, my responsibility, the way my parents had always drilled into me. So I grabbed the sharpest knife off the cutting board and stepped deeper inside. The moment I entered the dining room, I felt it. Someone had been here. A chair was pulled slightly away from the table, just enough to make it obvious that someone had sat there. In the hallway, a picture frame hung crooked on the wall, like a careless hand had brushed against it. On the counter was a coffee mug I never remembered using. These weren't the signs of a burglar searching for cash or electronics. These were little things, quiet things, almost like whoever it was wanted me to notice. My chest was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every creak of the floorboards made me think someone was about to jump out at me. I swept through each room on the first floor, knife shaking in my hand, but I didn't find anyone. Every door was still locked, every window sealed shut, no sign of forced entry at all. None of it made sense. If someone had been in here, how had they vanished without a trace? Each step I took made me feel smaller, weaker, like the confidence I had before was slipping away, leaving me with only fear. At some point, my nerves couldn't take it anymore, so I called the police. They showed up pretty quick and went through the whole place, inside and out, every room, every corner of the yard. But they didn't find a thing. No broken locks, no open windows, no muddy footprints in the grass. Nothing. It was like the house had swallowed that shadow whole and erased every trace. One of the officers tried to calm me down, saying maybe whoever it was had run off when they realized I was home. But that didn't sit right with me. If someone had really been inside, how did they vanish without a sound? By the time the police left, it was too late to call anyone else or leave the house. MJ and I were still shaken, but we had no choice but to stay. We double-checked every lock, shoved a dresser in front of the bedroom door, and crawled under the blankets like kids hiding from a nightmare. The silence of the house felt heavier than ever, and even with the lights off, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was still there, watching us from the dark.
The next morning, the terror sank in. Every single kitchen knife was gone. Not just one, every blade we owned. That's not something a normal thief does. They had also taken some cash, a couple of watches, and small electronics, but it was the knives that froze me. It felt less like a robbery and more like a warning, as if they wanted us to know they could come back anytime. That thought haunted me more than anything. When my parents came back and I told them everything, they were calm and more understanding than I expected. I've never been someone who scares easily, so I told myself I was fine. But deep down, the memory never left me. I still wonder how they got in, or where they were hiding while the police walked through my house. It's one of those mysteries that sticks with you forever, a quiet reminder that sometimes the scariest part is never finding the answer. This happened last year during Hollybush Bash weekends. I go to Rowan University, and for anyone who doesn't know, Hollybash is Rowan's big spring festival, kind of like our own mini Coachella. It's held every April on Hollybush Green, right near the historic Hollybush Mansion. There are carnival rides, food trucks, lawn games, and a concert with a surprise headliner. The whole campus shows up. It's supposed to be the most fun day of the year. I was a sophomore at the time, and like a lot of other students, I stayed out late that night. Rowan's in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood. Glassboro doesn't really feel dangerous, even at 2 in the morning. That's probably why I didn't think much of it when I left my friend's dorm and started walking back to Chestnut Hall alone. From the moment he showed up, I had a bad feeling about him. He was loud, overly confident, and spent way too much time talking to Amanda. It wasn't just small talk either. It was full-on flirting. He wasn't even trying to hide it. I felt disrespected, but I didn't want to make a scene. Amanda and I had been dating for a while, and while I trusted her most of the time, As the party wore on, the house got louder, messier, and more chaotic. I needed a break, so I stepped outside to get some air. The driveway was cool and quiet, a nice contrast to the noise inside. I was leaning against Amanda's car, just staring up at the stars, when I noticed someone standing at the far edge of the property. The figure was motionless, just standing there in the dim glow of one of the street lamps. I squinted, trying to make out who it was. When they didn't move, I decided to approach them. It was probably the liquid confidence that made me do it. I don't think I would have done it otherwise. I asked, "Hey, can I help you?" Trying to sound friendly, but a little assertive. The figure took a few slow steps towards me before stopping. It was definitely a man, that much I could tell, but I couldn't make out any notable features since it was so dark. He didn't answer my question. Instead, he asked, "Are your parents home?" The question.
I went back inside and ended up in the basement playing ping pong with a few other people. Amanda had a pool table upstairs, so most of the crowd was up there, leaving the basement quieter. I didn't feel like being my usual fun, social self, so I preferred the quieter atmosphere, where I could actually hear people talking. At some point, I heard the doorbell ring. At first, I didn't think much of it. This was a party, after all, so people coming and going wasn't anything out of the ordinary. But something in my subconscious was tugging at my brain, like there was something I was missing. As I stood there, mindlessly slapping a ping pong ball around, I realized what it was. Amanda had instructed everyone to come through the back door, which didn't even have a doorbell. That meant someone had come up to the front door, which wasn't supposed to happen. I excused myself from the game and headed upstairs, knowing I was probably overreacting, but wanting an answer. As I walked past Amanda's room, I noticed she was passed out on her bed, completely oblivious to the chaos around her. That's when it hit me. I was probably the only somewhat sober person. I was halfway to Magnolia when I heard the sound of bikes behind me. 3 more masked people rode up next to me. They didn't touch me or try to grab me, but they were heckling me, laughing, saying things I couldn't make out. I know that sounds pretty harmless on its own, but a few of them were waving around what looked like guns, which was the part that freaked me out the most. I guess they could have been fake, or airsoft guns even, but it was clear that they were trying to intimidate me. I tried to ignore them, but I could feel how close they were riding, just barely out of arm's reach. I made it to Magnolia and texted my friend to come meet me outside. He walked me back to Chestnut, and that made me feel a lot safer. Luckily, the bikers were gone by then.
I didn't call the police that night. I wasn't hurt, but I was really scared. I can't even fully explain why. It wasn't until the next morning that I told my mom everything. She ended up reporting it, and later that night, some of my guy friends texted me that they'd also been approached by a group of masked guys, and a few of them had pulled guns. Nobody was hurt, but it was enough that campus police started taking it seriously.
I've heard a lot of rumors about who those guys were. Some people think it was just a bunch of local kids trying to scare people. It's just the gun detail that freaks me out. It's likely that a group of armed non-students had somehow made their way into my dorm that night, the place I live. I've been scared to walk home alone ever since.
This story happened 2 summers ago, back when I was still dating Amanda. I've kept it to myself for a while, not because it's embarrassing or anything, but because I didn't want to risk unintentionally doxing her or her family. Now that we've been broken up for over a year, I think it's safe to talk about it. At the time, Amanda was working as a camp counselor for a summer program in the city. It wasn't exactly close to home, about a 25-minute drive from her quiet, wealthy suburban neighborhood. But she loved the job for reasons I still don't fully understand. I always thought it was a little beneath her, especially considering her aspirations in life, but I wasn't going to be a jerk and outright say that. Her house was exactly what you'd picture for a family in that kind of area. Big yard, 3 stories, high ceilings, and enough space to host just about any event. That's why, when the camp counselors were deciding where to host their end-of-summer party, Amanda's house was the obvious choice. I'm probably making it sound like that was the first time she hosted camp-related parties, but that's not really the case. It just so happened that it was my first time experiencing one since I hadn't been dating her the previous summer. Her parents were out of town that weekend. They were always out of town, really. I don't want to get too deep into it out of respect, but Amanda's family dynamic was odd. Her relationship with her parents more closely resembled that of 3 colleagues rather than 3 family members. Everything was very transactional, and it was blatantly obvious to any onlooker that all 3 of them were versions of the same narcissistic, insecure person, even though they despised being compared to each other. That description is honestly a little harsh. Her dad was pretty chill, and I honestly missed the guy. But, feelings. Anyway, the party was packed. Dozens of people crowded into the house and spilled out into the backyard. The vibe was lively and fun, and most of the guests were friendly and easygoing. Well, except for one guy, Pete.
From the moment he showed up, I had a bad feeling about him. He was loud, overly confident, and spent way too much time talking to Amanda. It wasn't just small talk either. It was full-on flirting. He wasn't even trying to hide it. I felt disrespected, but I didn't want to make a scene. Amanda and I had been dating for a while, and while I trusted her most of the time, she had a bad habit of being a little too friendly with other guys. It was a sore spot in our relationship, and I knew bringing it up would only cause problems. I didn't want to come off as insecure, so instead of confronting Pete directly, I came up with a different plan. I started acting overly friendly toward him. Every time he finished a drink, I offered him another. We talked, laughed, and before long, Pete was drinking faster than he probably should have been.
I don't exactly have the build of a heavy drinker, but the Irish and Mexican in my blood means my alcohol tolerance is always going to be absurdly high. My plan was to get him so wasted that he either made a fool of himself and the problem took care of itself, or he fell asleep and the problem took care of itself. It was a win-win. I was kind of surprised to discover that my plan had actually worked, and sooner than expected too. By midnight, he was passed out on the basement couches, drooling into a pillow. I was smug about it, but Amanda saw right through me. She accused me of doing it on purpose, which I denied. After some tense back and forth, I finally admitted that I may have played a small role in it. We argued a little, but it wasn't anything serious, just another disagreement to add to the pile. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that my petty stunt had put a damper on the night.
As the party wore on, the house got louder, messier, and more chaotic. I needed a break, so I stepped outside to get some air. The driveway was cool and quiet, a nice contrast to the noise inside. I was leaning against Amanda's car, just staring up at the stars, when I noticed someone standing at the far edge of the property. The figure was motionless, just standing there in the dim glow of one of the street lamps. I squinted, trying to make out who it was. When they didn't move, I decided to approach them. It was probably the liquid confidence that made me do it. I don't think I would have done it otherwise. I asked, "Hey, can I help you?" Trying to sound friendly, but a little assertive. The figure took a few slow steps towards me before stopping. It was definitely a man, that much I could tell, but I couldn't make out any notable features since it was so dark.
He didn't answer my question. Instead, he asked, "Are your parents home?" The question threw me off. It wasn't just what he asked, it was how he said it, like he already knew the answer. Before I could respond, he repeated his question, this time name-dropping Amanda's parents. He knew who they were. That was enough to turn the unease I'd been feeling into full-blown suspicion. I lied and told the guy my parents were inside, even though part of me thought he knew I didn't live there and that I was lying. Still, I thought maybe I could deter him from doing whatever he was going to do. The guy nodded and just said, "Okay," before turning and walking away. I expected him to head to a car or another house, but he didn't. Instead, he walked straight down the street, disappearing into the darkness. I watched him for as long as I could, but it was too dark to tell where he went. Something about it didn't sit right with me, but I tried to brush it off. I went back inside and ended up in the basement playing ping pong with a few other people. Amanda had a pool table upstairs, so most of the crowd was up there, leaving the basement quieter. I didn't feel like being my usual fun, social self, so I preferred the quieter atmosphere where I could actually hear people talking. At some point, I heard the doorbell ring. At first, I didn't think much of it. This was a party, after all, so people coming and going wasn't anything out of the ordinary. But something in my subconscious was tugging at my brain, like there was something I was missing. As I stood there mindlessly slapping a ping pong ball around, I realized what it was. Amanda had instructed everyone to come through the back door, which didn't even have a doorbell. That meant someone had come up to the front door, which wasn't supposed to happen. I excused myself from the game and headed upstairs, knowing I was probably overreacting, but wanting an answer. As I walked past Amanda's room, I noticed she was passed out on her bed, completely oblivious to the chaos around her. That's when it hit me. I was probably the only somewhat sober person left in the house. I turned her bedroom light off and gently shut her door, trying not to disturb her. When I got to the front door, a girl named Bella was standing there. I asked if she knew who had rung the doorbell. She was belligerently drunk, so getting a coherent response out of her was about as easy as getting one out of a squirrel. That girl was also pretty brain-dead sober, which didn't help matters. Eventually, she said that there was some old guy at the door who claimed to be a family friend and needed to return something he borrowed. In response to that, I yelled, "You let him in?" She shrugged her shoulders and walked away, presumably to go spin the roulette wheel on which random guy she would be bringing home that night.
He knocked the wind out of me as the two of us hit the ground, and I couldn't breathe. The guy started clawing at my shirt like he was trying to rip it off of me. With all the strength I had, I managed to push him off, but it was more panic than strength. He got up and sprinted straight across the room, dove out one of the open windows, and landed on the roof with a thud. I ran to the window just in time to see him drop into the side yard and take off running. I didn't chase him. I wouldn't have been able to catch him anyway. I just stood there, trying to process what had happened and catch my breath. The damage was done. He was gone.
But the encounter took its toll. I didn't want to stay up any longer and chaperone everyone. I didn't want to be the guy to kick everyone out either, so I actually called the police and told them to help me kick everyone out. Most of the local officers knew Amanda's family, so it wasn't like they were going to arrest anyone or do anything drastic. The cops came and kicked everyone out, and I secretly thanked them for their help. After they left, I went downstairs, slapped Pete awake, and told him he had to find some way home. He threw up before calling an Uber. The next morning, Amanda had no choice but to call her parents and tell them what had happened. They were furious, as anyone would be, but Amanda didn't seem to care. She had always been rebellious, brushing off authority like it was beneath her. They didn't even bother calling the police. The house had no cameras, and they figured it would be a waste of time. I'm still not sure how that guy knew Amanda's parents weren't home. Part of me thinks whoever robbed them knew them in some capacity. Looking back, that night revealed more about Amanda than I wanted to admit. Her indifference, her carelessness, it was all a red flag I should have taken more seriously. Hindsight, as they say, is 20/20.